Hi everyone, and welcome to my little video today. I wanted to talk about the lunar eclipse slash blood moon and the shadow work we can do around it. I know I usually post not on Thursdays about shadow work, but because the full moon and everything is tonight at like 1:30 in the morning, I thought I would post these things to talk to you about beforehand so that you can do some of these journal prompts that I have researched and come up with. And it's a mixture of different things I found online and what I've done with my own experience. So I thought it might help some people. So this eclipse and full moon is a really good time to work through some anger or rage or grief or shame. So, those are really uncomfortable emotions typically, and we don't typically want to really dig into them. But I'm here today to give you some journal prompts to help you dig into these emotions. So, I'm going to start with anger and rage. I have 33 prompts for anger and rage, 22 prompts for grief, and 11 prompts for shame. And not because they are less, not necessarily because there's less to talk about, but just because of how I worded the questions. So let's dig in. The prompts for anger and rage, I would say start with writing about what makes you angry and why. You can lean into questions like, what would you scream about right now if you could? What can you control about this situation or person when it has to do with your anger? What is out of your control? Is there anything you could forgive in this situation, this person, or within yourself that has to do with your anger or rage? Is there anything, and to forgive within yourself. If you were to let go of the anger, what does that look like? What does it look like when you hold in your anger? How does it make you feel? Where in your body do you feel this anger? That's a hard one to identify, but a lot of times when I start to feel a really big emotion, I'm like, oh, I feel it in my neck, my neck and back, and it's warm and or hot and um, tight, etc. And then a really good thing to do is do the opposite when you're feeling this emotion. So if I feel really tight and tense when I'm feeling anger, to help release it, it's good to just slowly untense and let that go. So that's a good exercise and journal prompt to do to talk about how you can do that. How can you release your anger that would help the situation or yourself? How can you release your anger that would harm the situation or self? It's good to identify both because it helps you better understand what you can do that's actually helpful in the situation. Obviously, right? It makes sense. What self care can you incorporate when you're angry? For example, when I'm angry, I like throwing rocks, especially at like a wall that no one's around, right? We don't want to throw rocks at people, but well, maybe we want to, but we shouldn't. And we could, get legally charged for things, so we don't want to do that. But we can throw rocks at a wall and yell out what we're angry about, like "fuck you," blah blah blah, or whatever, and that can help release some anger. Doing something physical with anger is really helpful for me, and I hope it's helpful for you. Other questions include, do you hold any shame or embarrassment with this anger? Why? Can you write a letter to your anger? What do you need to know? I'm sorry. What do you need that anger to know and feel in this moment? What other emotions are popping up? A lot of times anger is an umbrella emotion and has a layer of like sadness, depression, betrayal, shame, guilt, grief, pain, etc. So let's identify those emotions and maybe why they're there. Like, I feel pain because this person harmed me, and that makes me angry because I feel betrayed and that shouldn't have happened. They were my best friend or whatever. Another question is, when was the last time you reacted out of anger and how did it make you feel? If your bestie was going through this, what advice would you give to your bestie? And then how do you give that to yourself? What are you hoping to gain out of anger, if anything? A lot of times we hold in anger because we don't want to forgive and put someone in their place or something like that. And there's no judgment. When we do shadow work, we're not judging ourselves for what we feel. We're just acknowledging what we feel so that we can deal with it, release it, and move on. What does the opposite of anger look like to you? Is it peace, acceptance, happiness, payback? What does it look like? What do you need others to understand about your anger? If you could go back and change something, what would it be? And what would the domino effect be? How would that change everything else? In the end, do you still want to change it? It just helps give you a different perspective on what's going on. What situations trigger anger for you and why? What do you need in order to release the anger? Do you need a good cry? You need to throw some rocks? You need someone to go to jail? What do you need? What can you do to let out angry energy? I gave an example of, throwing rocks, maybe going exercising, something physical often helps with anger for me, and I hope it does for you as well. Journaling can help too. Writing in all caps, like you're yelling, can help. Different things like that. Is it difficult to acknowledge your anger? And if so, why? If not, why? How and where can you create a safe space to release anger? What do you hope to gain from releasing anger or rage? Replace anger and rage, whatever emotion you're dealing with. Grief is a hard one. It's the next one we're going to talk about. We can grieve the loss of a loved one. We can grieve the loss of ability to do a hobby with age because, I have hand and wrist issues and I can't always do all my hobbies. I used to love knitting, can't do that anymore. Can embroider, but loss of that, loss of mobility, loss of a job, or not getting a job that you really wanted, loss of a house or apartment, a pet, a habit. We can grieve all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be a loss of a physical person. So, what are questions we can ask ourselves when journaling about grief? What or who are you grieving right now? How does that grief impact you? What can you control about this loss? What is out of your control? What unfinished business do you have that's exacerbating this grief, and why? What are you holding on to, and why? What would it look like if you were to let go of the grief? Does that scare you? Why? How does this grief serve you to hold on to it? Because every emotion serves us. And there's no shame in expressing, I'm just not ready, and it serves my lack of desire to move forward. That's totally valid. If you let go of this grief, how would it harm you? Do you hold any shame or anger around this grief? Can you write a letter to your grief? And if so, go for it. What would you say? What do you need grief to know right now? What do you need others to understand about your grief? This is a really important one because I think it helps us be more heard, even if it's just a writing exercise. I'm grieving I'm 6 days sober today, and I'm grieving my loss of being able to smoke weed. And then previously I'm sober from alcohol, and I'm grieving the loss of not having any outlet that lets me kind of numb or be a little out there or whatever. And I have to find it naturally within myself, and that's really hard. And it's something that it took me a really long time to accept that this is the situation for what it is. So that's just an example. What would you say to your bestie going through the same thing? What situations trigger this grief? It's important to understand what triggers our emotions because we can better identify what's going on when that trigger happens. How can you bring mindfulness into these situations? What healthy coping tools do you have to handle these situations? Maybe talking to a friend is all you need, and that's a healthy coping tool. Or with grief, I'm trying to think. Other things that you can do besides like talking to a friend, journaling, exercise is so helpful. And it doesn't have to be like I'm going on a 5K run. Exercise can be something as simple as I'm going to do 10 jumping jacks to get some energy out. And that leads into my next question. What can you do to let out this energy of grief? If you're feeling really sad, maybe you need to cry. Or maybe you need to laugh. Maybe you need to do opposite action and laugh through something. Find a funny video or movie or show and enjoy that. Or maybe you need to really be in the sadness and you need to find a show that's kind of depressing and like just be heard that way. Whatever it is, it's okay. It's valid. Just do it. How and where can you create a safe space for your grief to be expressed? What energy can replace the grief? Whenever we're taking away something, it's always going to be replaced by something, whether we do it consciously or not. So it's important to think about, okay, I'm gonna release this grief under this full moon, and I'm gonna replace it with peace and acceptance, for example. And then you focus on that peace and acceptance, manifesting that peace and acceptance, saying I have peace with the situation. It's really helpful even if you don't have peace with the situation to say I do have peace with the situation, because it's a form of manifesting it, right? Like we all know that's a form of manifestation. So try that, see if that helps anything, and not just one time, but you have to try it repeatedly until it starts to become your reality. I don't know if I said this one. I can't remember. Oh, yeah, I did. The last question I have for grief is, who is a safe person to talk about grief with? It's important to identify who our safe people are when we're dealing with really hard emotions, because they are part of our support system. And even if you only have one person that you feel comfortable talking about, that's better than zero. And if you don't have anyone, talk to your journal, talk to the divine, the universe, whatever you believe in that's bigger than yourself. Talk to that. Um, okay. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about, the last one, is shame. Shame is a really hard emotion. Um, Sorry, I can't read my notes. Okay, I figured it out. Um, we could have shame around a lack of boundaries or of boundaries we've put in place. We can have shame around failure, around various behaviors that are labeled bad. Um, Shame around feeling fake, around unmet needs, rejection, not feeling good enough or worthy. We can have shame around, I said behaviors, so like our actions, something we've done in the past that we feel really ashamed about. Um, so the questions to explore for this are, what brings you shame? For me, it's past behaviors. I I had a lot of shame around my relationship with weed, and at one point my relationship with alcohol, and I'm working through it. But I've also had shame about things I've done in the past that I'm not proud of and I feel shame for. So acknowledging them is really important, and not, and you can like rip this paper up and burn it after you journal. Like, I don't care. I encourage the burning of shit. Um, but be honest with yourself about what you have shame around. What do you feel in your body when you feel shame? Does it weigh you down? How? Explain it, explore it, describe it. We talked about in my last shadow work video or podcast, we talked about mindfulness and the what skill, and the what skill comes down to observe, describe, participate. So for shame, observe it, describe it, And by participating in it, we're journaling about it, we're exploring it, etc. So that's one way you can do that. What labels are you putting on the situation or on yourself to make you feel shame? Such as I shouldn't have done that, this was bad or immoral or whatever the label is. What is, just describe it. What is it? How does that make you feel? Probably not great. It's shame. Shame doesn't make us feel great. Why? Was it, this is a great time to deconstruct what we've learned in the past, such as morality. Um, does it, is it shameful because you were taught by someone else, like let's say a religious leader, that you shouldn't do this thing and you did it? Well, you're human, you make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. What's important is that we acknowledge the mistake, we um, claim it, that hey, I fucked up and this is what I'm going to do to fix it, and then we do that. Which we may not be able to do the first time around, and that's okay because we're human. Let's see. What situations trigger this feeling of shame? What secrets do you keep because of shame? How does shame impact your relationship with yourself, with others? What do you need others to know about your shame? And not necessarily that you have to verbalize it to other people, but what do you wish other people knew? Like, for example, I feel a lot of shame around weed, but I need people to know that it served me at one point in time when I was suicidal and didn't want to get through the day, and I would smoke weed and it would make it bearable. So that had a purpose at one point that no longer serves me because thank everything, I am no longer suicidal and haven't been for years, which I'm so grateful for. And um, I'm trying to figure out which one I was on. But I might need others to understand that, even though I feel shameful about my relationship with weed, it was helpful at one point. And so, like, don't judge me, right? Like, I need others to not judge. How or where can you create a safe space to accept and release shame? What do you need to forgive yourself or others for in order to release shame? How can you reframe your labels or thoughts about shame in order to release shame? What behaviors or actions do you engage in due to shame? That is my 33, 22, 11 questions about rage and anger, grief, and shame. So I hope this helped you. If it did, let me know, because it just makes me, encourages me to do this more. So that's all I have. I hope you all have a great ritual with the full moon and that you're able to let go of some uncomfortable emotions. And it's okay if you don't let it go all at once. It's actually really hard to just let it go all at once. Um, but it's all about progress, right? So do what you can, do what feels right, not necessarily comfortable, but right, and sit with it for a little bit. Walk away if you have to and come back to it. The journal prompts. I will type them up as well and post the link for that in a blog post on stlwitches.com so that it's easier to go back to them. So that's all I got. Bye.